We're live.
Well, hey, happening now. We want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room, episode number 361 on October 22nd, 2025. My name is Jason Neiffer, and I am the executive director of the Montana Digital Academy, which is Montana's state virtual school located on the beautiful University of Montana campus in fabulous Western Montana. And joining me tonight, as always, from what's the weather look like right now in North Carolina, Wes? Is Charlotte
Oh,
delivering you the weather that you're expecting this season?
it's as beautiful as it gets, although this green screen effect is pretty weird. But yeah, we've been down to the high 40s in the morning, getting up into the low 70s during the day. Absolutely wonderful and beautiful weather. A great time to be in North Carolina.
Well, it's so
So
great
I
to
am,
hear.
yes, I am still teaching media literacy for middle school students, along with web design and computer programming here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I am glad, Dr. Neiffer, that your travels around the country and the world have allowed you to grace us with your presence tonight, because Peggy George is live in the chat room and S&C is here too. And there's a rumor my dad may show up too.
Well,
So,
that sounds great. And in fact, you mentioned travel. Literally just drove in from. I was in the Lockwood School District just outside of Billings, Montana, working with a group of southeastern Montana school administrators to introduce Notebook LM to them. And it bewilders me, and maybe this is just a sign about how quickly these tools are being kind of jetted towards us. But there were a lot of pretty Google savvy administrators in the room that hadn't heard of Notebook LM yet,
oh,
um,
absolutely.
and it continues to be, I think, just such a magical tool. But the demo I showed off today that I thought you kind of really encapsulated why these tool sets are so special, is putting your handbooks in Notebook LM. So if you're a school administrator, you know how important that handbooks are, and especially if you're in a smaller school or new to a school district and you're handed a set of handbooks upon your new contract in a new school district on July 1st. It's always very challenging. That's an incredibly important part of the new school year. But the demo I showed off that I think showed off the tool set well is that I shared our student, a parent, and our teacher handbook with Notebook LM. And the surface level of those tools is answer questions about the handbooks, right? Like, tell me what these handbooks say about, for example, the late work policy at my organization. And that it's not that that's not useful. It's just that it's really minimal compared to some of the more deeper analysis that a tool like Notebook LM could do. And so what I asked the notebook to do was compare the two handbooks and look for policy inconsistencies between what we tell teachers, what we tell parents and students. And not only did it do a great, and that was a risk too. I'm pretty sure that those handbooks are, we've actually used Notebook LM for that purpose. But I love the answer it gave me, which was there were no direct contradictions, but there were vague policies, or actually it noted that the teacher handbook went into much more detail about some policies than the parent student handbook did. And that is absolutely by design. In part because we tell our students they should be checking their email every day. Well, it's the teacher's job to check their email on weekdays, so that's a different phenomenon between the two. But it's just so funny, like that unlike the earlier days of EdTech, when I'd present about EdTech tools or train on EdTech tools, like once in a while my jaw would drop. But it's every day now that the what this really enables, that has nothing to do with generating AI slop, and everything to do with giving knowledge workers like principals, teachers, paraprofessionals, special education teachers, librarians, a really great tool set to help them do parts of their job that probably weren't getting the attention they deserved before because of the finite amount of time. So I somehow managed in the first 70 seconds of our podcast, Wes, to jump us down the AI rabbit hole right away. But
surprise, surprise. As long-term viewers may know, we've almost changed the name of the show to, the
yeah,
AI
the
situation.
AI education situational rama, something along those lines. But Hey, thank you, Dr. Fryer, for doing the lion's share of our links this week. What are we going to talk about? And maybe does any of that have not to do with AI?
Well, it does a little bit. So I do want to thank Peggy George, who's live here, and also shout out to my dad in Manhattan, Kansas, joining us from his first time from his penthouse apartment at the top of Meadowlark Hills, where I got to spend about 5 nights with him a couple weeks ago. We are going to
Wait,
talk.
hold on. I like to say this because it makes me feel like kids again, like, hi, Mr. Fryer. So,
That's
yeah.
right. Hey, and Dr. Neifert was here in Charlotte, North Carolina, in person just a couple weeks ago too. So we've had a lot happening. But I want to thank Peggy for drawing my attention to the fact that our website has been down for a little bit. And I think that I actually have come up with a workflow that is going to allow us to get things published a little more quickly. I will admit that I have my old school podcasting production workflows, and there's faster ways now with not only YouTube, but also Substack, and I have been helping a couple different organizations start new podcasts in the last month, and so I'm going to draw on that information. So we don't have. I'll put the link for those of you that are here live, and by the time you see this, hopefully our website will be repaired because we have a little malware on my server, and there's a quarantine. And anyway, have done this before. This is why we back up websites. But there is the link in our show notes. Well, there is the link in our live chat to our show notes. And if you want to click the anchor to go down to episode 361 for October 22nd, we have some article links for AI, security, miscellaneous, and then some geeks of the week. And so, is that your dog, Dr. Knifer?
That is indeed my dog. Yeah.
It
So I'm looking
is.
at the
It
mute
is.
button right now. Yeah. Lou's got a nice guttural bark when he is not, when he feels like he's not being paid attention to appropriately.
There you go. All right. Well, we have not. Well, anyway, we just had sort of an erratic schedule of late, and I think we proved we could even just do a whole hour show without adding links. But a live demo from Dr. Knifer is quite exciting. So will not hesitate to do that. But do you want to start in a particular place, Dr. Knifer, or do you want to talk about the ChatGPT browser to open us up, or should we go somewhere
Yeah,
else to do that?
I mean, I don't like many people. I can't surf the news and doom scroll as the kids call it today, just because there's a lot going on, a lot to pay attention to, and it's as much as in Montana as in any other place. But I do try to check the headlines once a day, and I didn't see this one yesterday, but early this morning, I saw that ChatGPT has released the Atlas browser, which is an AI browser. And what's interesting about it is that I think I didn't read very closely into it. I spent maybe 9 minutes on it this morning, but it is available right now just for Mac OS. And Sam Altman, I think, tweeted this morning, as I think the activity I saw, that they're working hard on other browsers. It's not a surprise to me that they went with Mac OS first, just because that's been the pattern of Perplexity and some of the other browsers that are in the new browser space. I believe it's built over the Chromium open source browser, so it's got the same kind of DNA and guts as Chrome does, so it should work with things like plugins. But I did play with it for about 10 minutes this morning, and there's a lot of AI plugins for Chrome and Firefox, for that matter, that can do similar things to this, but it promises an agentic experience. And thanks for sharing the screenshot, including like you can ask it to, like in this case, it's showing off some Instacart shopping where it's doing things ultimately on its own. And something that I actually accomplish right now with a couple of browser plugins and an API key from OpenAI is that it does a great job of summarizing or looking at multiple tabs and being able to write emails for you, whatever your kind of general AI piece is. And in my mind, this is kind of the next step in the browser wars, right? That Firefox will continue in part, and I think we talked about this earlier this year, that the federal judge in the antitrust case with Google didn't make Google sell off the browser. They also didn't force them to stop their payments to Apple and Mozilla and other companies for making Google the default search engine. So that's going to help the Firefox browser, I think, continue to exist, because they were relying on that money to help continue to develop and maintain the browser. But now that there is Dia, which is an AI browser, and Perplexity has their own browser called Comet. I'm trying to think of the other ones that I've
Oh,
installed.
wow. I don't think I knew about Comet.
Yeah, Comet is Perplexity's browser. And by the way, at this point, if you're not, if you don't have a pro account with Perplexity, there's literally 400 ways to qualify for one for a year for free. A .edu address will get you one. If you're a PayPal user, apparently you can get a year of that. There's all sorts of interesting plays right now in the AI browser space, but it's a pretty wild west world right now with all these new options and choices.
Okay, so I downloaded the Dia browser and used it for a while, but I didn't ever have an impressive experience with it.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit? Well, I'll give a stab at this and then correct me.
Yeah, please.
Well, really, the browser is the centerpiece of modern productivity today. And so the control of that browser is really important. And especially once advertising starts getting layered in here because it's coming, there's a lot of money at stake. There's a lot of money that's been invested. From a privacy standpoint, we covered on the show months ago, I think, how Microsoft was having the audacity to consider recording everything we did, and what could go wrong with that? But folks, this is literally that
Yeah.
same thing, because if we download OpenAI, ChatGPT's Atlas browser, or we use the Comet browser, or the Dia browser, or whatever other browser, like every keystroke, every search, everything is going to be tracked and documented. And so we are trusting that company to have our data. That company is almost certainly going to monetize all of that data. I think it really begs a whole lot of questions, but one of them is like, how can I do a start over, right? Like with the digital footprint, like how can I just be like, okay, wipe everything out? Like when I joined Spotify, one of the things I enjoyed about that was, yes, I've been using Apple Music for a long time, but it was a fresh slate. And so I got to, use the music I wanted, and it built this, great, history, and it does a great recommendation engine, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, there's really big privacy implications to this.
Yes.
So I'm curious, what did I leave out, Jason? And are you using one of these browsers, or are you at all hesitating to jump in with both feet?
What I would say is that, I do open them up occasionally, but there's two things that I really hesitate on. The first one is that, I've seen some really cool videos. The people that made Dia, which is the same people that made, I'm trying to remember the name of their last browser, Arc. I could never figure out the Arc interface in the way that, I watched the video 10 times over. I feel like I'm a pretty tech savvy person. I could never, it seemed really amazing and logical, but I could never figure out the workflow. And then they abandoned the Arc browser. And in fact, that's been forked into a separate browser project altogether. And then Dia is the next generation from, I think it's literally called the Browser Company. And they've been bought by someone else, I think. So they're owned by someone else now. But I saw some really cool demos on YouTube. In fact, the developers of the Dia browser had given it to a bunch of college students, undergraduate and graduate students, and said, figure out cool workflows with this. And their founders, showed off some really cool things that students were doing with Dia, because it allows you to take any tab in your browser and that's open and chat with it, right? And right now, I'm pretty sure that it's free, and there's ways you can plug that in. But there are two things that that kind of block me from doing that more. The first one is that I maybe this is just a sign of my, my I'm turning into, guy that yells at cloud, but I mean, I'm really good with the Chrome browser, right? It's very natural to me, and most of these are derivatives of Chrome, so it's not that unusual. But I have my plugins just right, and I curate a browser experience like you talk about, Wes. It is the window to the web, right? And I spend 95% of my time on a computer on the web. There's really no other application for me other than web. That's why I can easily use a Chromebook, because I'm a web user. The second thing is that I have seen stories of concerns about prompt injections, because what Dia does, what Perplexity's comment browser does, what I'm assuming ChatGPT does, and I could be simplifying this a little too much, so I will admit that, but it's scanning pages, right? And if you go to a page that has a purposeful, or maybe not even a purposeful, like information about a prompt, and the AI is scanning that and takes that as a command, I could very easily see, if are signed into your Gmail account, that it could do something in the background that compromises your security or privacy. And like Peggy George just said in chat, I can't imagine what could possibly go wrong with that, right? And there is a lot of I understand why IT directors of all stripes, whether we're talking about school IT directors or IT directors in general, are concerned about all these new browsers that are popping up. And if you're logging in on a home computer to your corporate email account with one of these browsers, you're essentially exposing potentially your email or classified or internal documents to AI hijacking. And AI is amazing for sure. I don't want to discount that, but we still don't really understand how it works, right? And it is. I heard the metaphor a couple of weeks ago that AI is not developed; it's grown, right? That these models keep getting fed information. You make the point, Wes, about all your private information. I will tell you that I've had some really interesting conversations with school districts and school administrators the last couple of weeks that are specifically related to Google's tools, saying that they wanted to try to use a third-party tool because they're worried about what Google does with their data. But to be honest with you, if your school's already using Google Apps, you've exposed all of your private data to Google, right? And so there is a bit of a trust exercise here. And I don't necessarily feel like that the big tech, and I'm not talking about new or old big tech, I'm talking about all big tech, privacy isn't top of their list. And so, this is where I think regulation would be very useful. It doesn't feel like that the United States, outside of a couple of states, is really all that interested in having aggressive regulation be part of the early AI strategy. So I think we're going to have to continue to think about what that means and what we want to expose ourselves to.
Well, as we get into the articles, for several of them today, first I was making a PDF, and then I realized I didn't have to. Just asking ChatGPT, hey, summarize this as if I'm a sixth grader and simplify it. And it's freaking amazing. Maybe I can go to one of these articles and show that. So being able to have powerful AI platforms at our fingertips, there's issues, there's hallucinations. There's an article I have about medical, stuff, and a report for Congress for medical stuff that had these hallucinated studies and things. There's issues, but particularly when we give it content like notebook, like you were starting out tonight, Jason, talking about Notebook LM. But I do the same thing frequently with ChatGPT, which I'm using mostly. I've used Claude as well. I need to get my Perplexity license. In fact, those of you in the chat room that can chat in, let us know if you're licensing Perplexity, if you've been able to qualify for a free subscription. Because honestly, that is one of the most helpful things. I learned about Notebook LM, I'm pretty sure from you here on the show, Jason, and it has been one of the most useful tools. So when we give it that content, I know what I was going to say. So interesting. There were some small events happening Saturday morning. People may be aware of. I won't go into that. But I talked to the AV team at the one that I was attending, and there were one was an electrical engineer, another computer scientist was asking them about vibe coding, and the computer science engineer was really down on it because he described putting some stuff in and just asking, and oh my gosh, it didn't work and it hallucinated. I wonder how many people who are very negative and down on these tools, and I'll talk about vibe coding specifically, which means coding with AI, but like they're just putting something in and expecting a magical result to
Yeah.
immediately come. And I don't think I've ever seen that. I mean, I've certainly been amazed at an initial image or something like that, but you know, the work is really the prompt and iterating and coming back and
Yeah.
forth and not only coming up with a prompt and that's where the super prompt. I've got an article from Tom's Guide or whatever about these like seven prompt strategies. Excellent stuff. Anyway, I want to encourage people not only to play with the tools, but to play with them more than just, yeah, I tried this once and it sucked and I'm not doing it anymore. Like, no, that's not giving these tools, that's not putting these tools through their paces and really seeing what they can do. Because especially if you're putting content in, and then if you're working with some of these sophisticated prompts, like we've talked about Mike Caulfield's SIFT prompt that he says works the best in Claude, or at least he said that. Anyway, it's interesting to me because I was talking to a colleague today about folks I've run into in the education space, very anti-AI. Very AI is unethical. They'll say, I don't use it at all. I don't recommend anyone uses it for these reasons. That's not where certainly I am today or Dr. Neifer. But then there's also these folks, like I said, who have tried it, but it's like, I don't know what the right analogy is. There's a banana split and you're just going to have one little taste of ice cream. You're like, oh, it's not really that amazing. Wait a second. There's this whole thing and you're not fully experiencing it. I don't know that that's a good analogy. That's off the cuff, but I think you just got to get deeper into it.
Yeah, and I would also say too, like I think there's good reasons to be very concerned about AI, but I also think that you need to approach those from a standpoint of knowledge about the tool sets, right? Because I do hear a lot of misnomers. They were very frequent in 2023. Like if you put something in chat, or if you put something in ChatGPT, it will be in a Google search the next week. I mean, I heard things like that. Also that people don't people don't that's not a fair characterization, but I've also heard arguments about there are kind of misnomers about how it trains on your data, right? And it does train on your data. And yes, theoretically, anything if you have training on your chats turned on, theoretically it could pop up at any time. Just the likelihood of that happening is so low, because it's literally training on billions of data points. And and I think the most interesting things about AI. I mean, I have fun with the image generators, that's for sure, right? And actually, one of the hallmarks of a lot of my presentations to teachers is I like showing off like how quickly the image generators have evolved, and now you can do truly remarkable things. Nano Banana is a great example of
I'm
that.
still not using it that much.
Yeah, well, I mean, for Wes, I don't need to go into it here, but like one of the things that I have worked on is a series of prompts lately that kind of extract the design DNA from an image and then allow you to recreate images. And so I took my organization's logo as an example of this, right? Which we paid to have a designer design the logo a couple of years ago. We really like the logo; it's nice and simple. But we extracted the design language from it, and then had it create additional icons that we could use in presentations, and it created a beautiful set of icons. That kind of fit within the color scheme and the geometry of our logo. And we would have no means to do that otherwise. And from that standpoint, I think the tool sets are pretty great. But don't get me wrong, we have a lot of big conversations to come. And, it's just unfortunate that we're going to have to tackle these when there's just so much other cruft broadly in our country and in states across the United States, specific and outside of education, that are going to suck up a lot of oxygen here because, we have to deal with this whether we like it or not.
All right, I want to take us to an article, and I'm going to go right to the one that I did include an AI summary of. And this is an Ars Technica article from today. It's called "When Sycophancy and Bias Meet Medicine," and I've dropped two links into the live chat. Well, shoot, I'm going to just share it because we've got our screen here. So here's the article on Ars Technica. And my prompt was, explain this to me like I'm a sixth grader. And so what's this article about? This article talks about how using AI like ChatGPT in medicine can sometimes be a big problem if we're not careful. And then it says, what's going wrong? AI has three big issues when used in health. And I'm just going to say, these are three terms that we absolutely all should know when it comes to AI: hallucination, sycophancy, which I need to just repeat over and over again because I've not been able to just say that one myself. I was like, it's the S word that means, flattering people. And then black box. Hallucination meaning AI makes stuff up. Okay. Sycophancy, I like this definition. It means trying too hard to agree with people. AI sometimes tells people just what they want to hear, even if it's not true. And then this idea of the black box is what Jason was saying a little while ago, that we don't really understand completely how it works. And it is kind of like a magic box. The models are now revealing their thinking more, and they're providing links, and they're giving some greater insight into what they're doing. But I mean, I think it still is pretty magical because it's a design based on the human brain, and it's scaling with the more, the more neural connections, the more complex that the models are, and the more, chips they have and the more connections they make, the better they are. So they're saying it can lead to bad decisions and a cycle of mistakes. So this government health report, and we can be specific about this, in late May, the White House's first Make America Healthy Again, MAHA report, was criticized for citing multiple research studies that did not exist. And so they also have the reference to an article we've talked about before. This is a Washington Post from June, where lawyers, you don't know this trick, this is really helpful. Archive.ph, put your paywalled article in and take a look at the full article without the paywall. Lawyers using AI keep citing fake cases in court. Judges aren't happy. And so, there's these different things that have happened and continue to happen in the AI space. And they really, I think, need cultural literacy. Like, we all need to know lawyers have gotten in trouble in court in front of a judge using an AI generated, analysis that had completely hallucinated and made up court cases. And then the judge was not happy about this. Well, now we've got a report of the United States government actually, producing a report that has studies that AI hallucinated. So, these are real issues, but I love how simple this is. This is just phenomenal. So back to the AI browsers that we were talking about. What does it mean? We can live in a world where, we can have a couple different windows open, and here's my article, but then here's my, quick little summary to help me ingest that and understand that better. I think that's pretty phenomenal. So,
well, and let me share the example that I've often shared with fellow educators about this. That, I mean, if all you're doing is getting summaries and reading summaries, right? I think that can be very problematic, right? Especially if it's within your wheelhouse. If you, I see it as a way to help me decide what to focus my attention onto, right? I often will use an AI summary a system. And there's literally 1,000 ways to do it now. But I get a lot of reports across my desk over the week, and from different organizations, nonprofit, for-profit, new studies. I can't spend 30 hours a week reading. I wish I could, but I can't. So I have to decide if reading something in depth is worth my time. And usually I'll read the executive summary if it's offered, and then I have a text expansion link that says, "Here are the 14 things I'm really into. Tell me what is covered in this link about that specifically," right? And then that helps me judge whether that goes into. I do have a folder sitting on my iPad of it's basically like when I don't have Wi-Fi folder. So, airplanes is a good example of that. If I can't get onto it free or cheap, or I, just looking for some fodder on a Saturday morning or something. But if it's got things in there that I know is going to be worth my time, then I'm going to invest the time to continue to read that, right? I think that's an important piece of this. But I also think too, that especially when you're having students reach higher than their reading or knowledge level, and that it could provide a very important scaffolding to you, right? And the example I would use with that is like when I had to take a research core for my terminal degree. I also taken several statistics courses. But there are times when I get out of my depth and I need the assistance with AI to build back up, or in some cases it's been 10 years, well, 14 years now since I've taken some of those classes, right? To like remind me what these things mean. Like when they report the p value, that's a bad example because that's something that gets pounded in your head. So, but when they report the p value, what does that mean in context of reading this research, right? And from that standpoint, I think it's just an extraordinary tool set. But I did hear we're working with an AI tool called TrueMark now. It's one of our launch partners with MTA's Frontier Learning Lab. And I had the opportunity to co-present with their CEO last week at a Montana Administrator Conference. And he said something that was that I'm going to, my old boss, Bob, used to have there's Will right now, the CEO of TrueMark. He said something that I'm reminded of my old boss, Bob Curry, the founding executive director of MTDA, that said, after 3 times, I will just steal your idea and not give you credit for it. But Will said something really great in our presentation, was that AI is not made for kids, right? It is not a kid-facing tool. And he's right? Like especially if we're talking about learning students, there's a 1,000 ways that AI can be used very well in the learning process, but raw AI, right, going to Chat GPT isn't built for kids, right? It's built for savvy adults. And I think Will is 100% straight on for that, which is why using a nuance tool with students or kind of student-facing AI tools is pretty darn important. But, how do we talk kids, especially in an era where it seems like a lot of our students are quite cynical about learning and the deep processes required? How do we build that wherewithal? How do we build, to use the grit term, which was so controversial 15 years ago, right? How do we build that kind of learning process into our students when they have things literally in their pocket that will do a lot of that thinking for them? And that's a cultural problem we have to face in schools.
Well, I do want to get to some more articles, but I've got to mention I will not attribute the school or the kids, but I had a conversation this last week with some high school kids, and I was asking them actually about AI and were teachers letting them use AI, encouraging them to? No, nobody was. What's it doing for writing? And one of them said, writing in English is so much easier now because we have to do all our writing in class. We're not allowed to do any writing at home. And it's just so easy. And I was like, I don't think that's the adjustment that we want to be making. And I think this is, I don't know, man, I'll say it. I think this is the most challenging semester and year to be a teacher
Yeah.
because I mean we've had egg tech tools and there's cheating and there's all this stuff, but the level that these AI tools, the level and quality of work they can do is really exceptional. And I think it's always hard to come up with authentic assessments that really assess what students have learned, what they can do. It's challenging, but I think it's even more so today. And those were, I don't know how representative those comments are of students in high school, other places, and English classes, but that it affirmed what I had suspected, and that was that a lot of teachers are just doing in-class writing, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and I get the teachers are doing the quick hacks because we don't have good answers to these things yet. But the thing I keep thinking about too is those poor teachers that are having to read student handwriting in 2025, right? I mean, it's something that was, and we could certainly, the thing about mentioning handwriting is that it's the closest we get to a Jerry Springer moment in education because chairs start flying pretty quick, right? On both sides of that particular issue, but it is a big thing, right? And absolutely, it certainly is impacting the ability to think about how we might deal with these tool sets for sure.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, here's a positive. All right, we're going to be critical, but let's also, be positive. Here is an Ars Technica article from today. Using AI to analyze earthquake data is like putting on glasses for the first time. Comically good at detecting small earthquakes, and then pattern analysis. It's amazing to think about these large data sets that now. And I was listening to NPR actually on the way home, and they were talking about I guess a cardiac age, because they're taking all this data about heart scans and blood and but it's really the function of the heart. But there's so much data that can now be ingested that they're coming up, some companies, with this age of, this is the age of your heart. And it's just this positive, potentially really positive side of when you have these systems that can handle so much data, be able to detect so many patterns. It's incredible what it's going to do. As an aside, this is interesting. There's a hurricane brewing right now in the Caribbean, and living as we are in North Carolina, we do kind of track these things. We didn't see any fall colors last year outside of our immediate area because the mountains of Western North Carolina were completely closed after Hurricane Helene hit. And so, anyway, it is interesting to me that even if we have all the data, my very rudimentary understanding of meteorology is that it's such a dynamical and chaotic system that we still won't be able to predict with exact certainty. But that article about the earthquake, detection, that we're getting both good and bad, right? We talk about this on the show. So, do you have any favorite examples like that, Dr. Neifer, that you like to point to in terms of like, oh my gosh, what a good this is that AI is either bringing right now or you think will imminently bring it? Because there's certainly all this promising by the AI, gurus or the
Yeah, I mean, I think the medical breakthroughs that are happening are no question, quite extraordinary because it is able to automate a lot of manual processes that I think are really quite extraordinary, right? And I think that those are easy ones. And I also think that you mentioned the SIFT tool and Mike Caulfield and the work that he's doing on media literacy and using AI to kind of help debunk myths, right? That's a tool I use 25 times a week, right? In fact, I noticed that his GPT said it had 1,000+ uses. Those must all be for me, so I think that number must be vastly unreported. But that's something that I do with news now, right? That I'm becoming very cynical about our news sources, traditional media or not, and certainly we have. Well, I did see an article the other day today that I probably should have bookmarked, but that 50% of all new or of all new web pages are AI slop, right? But are and not like they used AI to help write the article. That is a different thing. It's like literally generated information that is passing itself off as human created. And I think that that's something that is you're really quite extraordinary to talk about. But yeah, I mean, I think that there is a lot of really nuanced uses of these tools that are really no nonsense uses for sure, right? And we have an information rich world. I used to do an information overload presentation regularly to teachers and administrators at schools and conferences. There was a set of books in the 1980s called Information Anxiety that talked about the overwhelming amount of information. And of course, that was tiddlywinks compared to the extraordinary amount of information that we have today. And, Dr. Fryer and I have talked about this several times, but the fact that you can publish to the world via the internet is the most extraordinary double-edged sword, right? Like, it is so empowering to give students the opportunity to publish with one click. It's so empowering to give teachers and a lot of influencers. Like, the influencer economy has its downfalls for sure, right? But the fact that I've talked often about my good friend and partner of crime at Montana Digital Academy, Mike Agustinelli's mom has a thriving YouTube channel where she connects with tens of thousands of crafters, across the United States and beyond, and is able to put out some just extraordinary personalized materials. I don't know if I've told this story before, Wes, but I'm going to tell it now because I think it's
we're a certain age, Jason, and I think people will just excuse it as that's
the old dudes and
okay.
their stories, right? Yeah. So in 1991, I left my hometown of Great Falls, Montana, to go to the University of Kansas in Lawrence, Kansas, for a 3-week summer debate camp, and it was a life-changing experience for me. I didn't know it at the time, but it kind of redirected my attentions to debate later on in college, and then ultimately coaching debate. And I grew up in Great Falls, where there was probably 10 total radio stations, and there was no talk radio in Great Falls at that time. There actually probably was maybe some kind of leaning right radio available, but I listened to a radio show that was a radio station that was business programming. And I was just enthralled because there was this like extra information available. And then in college, I ended up getting a kind of it wasn't satellite, but it was cable, 200 radio station cable service that was super amazing. And I'm still blown away that you can download apps where you literally have access to 20,000 radio stations from around the world, right? Like that still blows me away that I can listen to Parisian radio, like broadcast radio stations over the internet. And so the fact that the internet itself is available in this way, still absolutely blows my mind. But again, that low that low barrier to entry to broadcast around the world is by far the most double-edged sword that we have, because I was thinking about long tail theory from 15 years ago, and how the internet will join together with people with extremely unique niches. But that too has its own upsides and downsides. So I'm waxing poetically tonight. I think that may be a 52-year-old dude thing. But yeah, I totally hear you, sir.
I still want to do some more AI stuff. We have about 15 minutes left, but we got to talk about some security stuff too.
Yeah, please do.
So let's talk about this most expensive hack ever in the history of the United Kingdom. This is an article from yesterday, today, October 22nd. Ars Technica. Jaguar Land Rover looking at a $2.5 billion price tag from
Wow.
its crippling cyber attack. There was a month-long shutdown of internal systems, and that affected over 5,000 different British organizations. The nonprofit Cyber Monitoring Center ranks the severity of events, and Ciaran Martin, former head of the National Cybersecurity Center, said the following: "This incident looks to have been by some distance the single most financially damaging cyber event ever to hit the UK." And so this is just tremendous, tremendous impact. And then in addition, there's another security article that was pretty eye-opening. There was a big outage for AWS, for Amazon's web services. And so this is an article. I guess I need to put both of these in the chat. This is an article that's saying, this outage reminds us of, why you might not want an internet connected bed, because evidently these beds got stuck in, different weird configurations, and the smart mattress covers malfunctioned, and these are like two $2,500 beds. And then speaking of the long tail, Wired, and I'll do the paywall version here from archive.ph. Wired has the article from today, the long tail of the AWS outage. And it's basically saying outages like this are inevitable today because of how complex and highly dependent the internet is. I think back to the CrowdStrike incident that happened summer before last, right? We had folks that were on, trips with students. A friend of mine was leading a trip in Canada with over 20 folks, and CrowdStrike hit, and all these flights got canceled, and it was massive. And that was a patch that was buggy. That wasn't a cyber attack, but here's your, cautionary, advice from Communitarian Prepper West. We all need to do things that can help prepare ourselves for hopefully what is a temporary outage of services, whether that, is the internet, it's electricity, it's water, it's flights. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things, but, we sometimes feel like, Chicken Little here. We've, there's another cyber attack. There's another cyber attack. But hey, this is the largest one in the history of the UK. It was a month long, and it's a big deal. And we need to be taking steps to protect ourselves, protect our families. This is a drum we beat regularly about password managers and, multi-step authentication, all of that good stuff. So were you affected by the outage of AWS? Do you have any stuff?
We were, yeah. Canvas, which is our LMS, was substantially impacted, and one of our other tool sets was impacted. And, it was annoying that it was out for a day, but, kids missing out on one day of LMS access is not the hugest of deals. There were a lot of very critical systems that were down that day. And it's a very real thing. And I certainly don't want to give into. I still think the cloud is a much better option than especially for schools than a vast other set of trying to host services locally. But yeah, it's a big deal when things go down.
Here's a Tom's Guide article from October 20th that I think was just fantastic. I don't know if you saw this one. It's titled 7 Prompts I Use for Every AI Chatbot, and they work for just about everything. And he talks about having, hundreds of different interactions. So sometimes he'll ask the chat to forget everything rather than you could start a new chat. And sometimes, I don't know if, I'm sure you've had this happen. Anybody who's been using these tools much, sometimes it'll get into a loop where it's just kind of stuck. That can be with an image generation or with other things. So forgetting everything from this point. Explain it like you're me. Explain it like I'm 5. That's what I did tonight. Yeah. Explain it like I'm in 6th grade.
Yeah.
And it just really simplifies it. The argue with me prompt, take the opposite side of the argument, convince me I'm wrong. The detect my bias prompt. Okay, this can be a little unnerving, he says, how good it is, but analyze this, whatever I wrote, and then tell me what hidden bias or assumption I'm showing. The describe the picture you can't see, because AI can be extremely descriptive. So imagine this scene and fill in what you think it looks like. So really getting some descriptive language. The 3 versions prompt, give me 3 versions, one that's safe, one that's bold, and one that's weird. That really leads to sometimes some very creative answers. And then the last one is the show your work prompt. He says it's his personal favorite. Explain your reasoning step by step before giving the final answer. So this is really one of the more helpful articles I've seen in a while about prompts. And I'm trying some of these. I tried some of them tonight.
Well, and while we're sharing that, I do want to share a recent Substack post that I posted on the Frontier Learning Lab Substack called "Stupid Prompting Tricks." And thanks, Wes, for going to it live right now. And the one of the things that I really encourage both students and teachers, or I should say educators of all jobs, to do is that one of the ways that you can really learn some deep prompting is to be kind of silly about it, right? And so you like the image, don't you? So
I do.
yeah. So that's Jason, talk show host, and kind of giving homage to Mr. David Letterman, who is a part-time Montana resident, actually. So, but these are examples of that. But it's funny because I read that same article yesterday, and the one I love the most out of your examples, or those examples, was explain it to me like you're me, right? And that's the both a little bit creepy and also amazing thing that happens when you let ChatGPT get to know you, right? And it's got this extraordinary set of memories that it collects about you over time. And as it turns out, like that ability for it to talk to you like you're you. And I tried it last night. I'm trying to remember. Usually, my prompt for that is explain string theory to me, like you're me, right? And I know just enough about string theory to kind of be able to judge the answer pretty well, right? And again, I don't want to claim that I understand string theory, but having explained string theory last night to me like it's me was, I think, a pretty extraordinary example of that set of prompts. So yeah, wonderful share, Wes. Wonderful share.
Okay, well, here's an example. Let's do this live. So this is Ars Technica today. Google claims to have a useful quantum algorithm that outperforms a computer. So, well, actually, I think I did this one in ChatGPT. I cannot fully explain quantum, and there's somebody who said, one of the fathers of quantum computing said, if you can, if somebody tells you they can, they're lying. They can't. It's not simple. But I'm going to say explain the key ideas of this article to me like I am a 6th grader. And then it should be able to search it. I find that the tools are really, really good for when I load PDFs. So classical computers versus quantum computers. And they talk about, classical 0 or 1, quantum uses qubits. And, the bottom line is Google was able to use an algorithm that's 13,000 times faster than a classical supercomputer. And this was involving the modeling of molecules. And so this can matter because things like drug discovery, material science, these things require just a lot of computing power. Again, to Jason's point, I'm not suggesting that we should be stopping reading articles. We don't. But especially, as you just pointed out, when you get out of your depth, and I'm not an expert on quantum, I'm certainly willing to ask for help in trying to understand that and explain it. And I'm also taking this to another step, with students. And I think I've mentioned this before. almost on a daily basis, multiple times a week, asking ChatGPT specifically, which I still find better than Gemini, but I'm not as practiced with it, to create an infographic for me. I'm frequently having to iterate. It uses too much text. No, simplify this. Make this with icons. But those kinds of tools, I just, I could use Canva and I use graphic tools. I love to create with media, but I don't have time as a classroom teacher to make those kinds of things. And I'm getting to create them with AI, proof them, make sure that they work and they're all accurate. But I'm rarely seeing misspellings, and it's just fantastic. Just love it.
Yeah. So much so. I still have a hard time believing that any of this stuff exists, to be really
Oh
honest
my
with you.
gosh, it's crazy.
Right.
Hey, how about
Uh,
your Napster or your AI toilet? I think those would be great too.
yeah, yeah, obviously the news we really want to hear about. Well, first of all, Napster's back, and in a whole new way. I'm sure that name has been bought and sold 400 times over since it was a file sharing system a long time ago. But there's a couple of interesting plays here. There is a Napster companion, which is an AI companion platform. Companion AI companions for me are not really a big deal for me, but there is apparently some hardware plays that Napster's working on that will add like a 3D element to your monitor. I don't really exactly understand it yet. I was more interested in the fact that just in general that Napster still existed and that it's back. But I would say maybe an interesting thing coming soon. One of the things that I haven't mentioned in the Frontier Learning Lab part yet is that we are working on some VR XR plays to support schools in the state of Montana. And whenever I see the notion of inexpensive equipment that can add another element to computing, I think that's always very interesting. I am quite sad that Google Cardboard is not around, because I thought that was an absolutely brilliant play that I wish Google had kept up with.
Did they? And they did go away.
Yeah, and it's such a wonderful way to be inexpensive for that process. But I thought that was really interesting. And then, in case you're interested, you mentioned earlier, that the hardware with AI components getting hacked. Well, here's something you probably don't want hacked. There is an AI toilet piece now. It is a $600 device
It's a camera.
that that's a camera for your toilet, right? It's a $600 device that sits inside your toilet. It has a prescription, or not, it's a prescription, a subscription. But Kohler is the company that is doing this, and it analyzes your poo. So for better or for worse, it can note trends over time. And the part about this that I think is actually quite sketchy is that we've mentioned 1,000 times on this podcast that one of the problems with Internet of Things is that over time it can get very that if firmware is not updated, it can get hacked. And I guess the last thing I really want is a hacked
Camera on your toilet.
yes, exactly. Thank you, Dr. Fryer. I wasn't sure how plainly to put that, but that's exactly the piece that I would be quite concerned about. But AI coming to a toilet bowl near you.
Oh, okay. Well, we can't end on that note. Well, the folks that I was talking with on Saturday actually about various technical things, including IoT projects, were mentioning, and I don't remember which company this was, but they were it was a big Internet of Things company, and they were giving users like 2 weeks notice, and then they were just gonna discontinue support. And oh my gosh, it's so hard because there's so many devices out there, and we haven't built in regulation and structures, to keep these devices from being hacked. And anyway, make sure you're ready for the lights to go off for a while, folks. I'm just going to say that. All right, we need some geeks of the week.
So let me share a quick one here that we've talked a lot about local AI And especially if you're running an M1 or better Mac, you can right now download a program called Olama that will allow you to run open source models directly on your computer. Now, obviously, the more memory you have, the faster chip you have, the better it's going to be. But there are so many like pretty fabulous projects that are built on top of Olama. And the one I wanted to share was something called Native Mind. And Native Mind is a Chrome plugin where you can access the local AI on your machine, the Olama, as it's called, and have it do kind of fancy things in your web browser, including summarizing web pages like Dr. Fryer was talking about earlier. It pops a button up in your email that allows you to craft email replies. And what's great about this is that it's all local. It doesn't go anywhere out to the internet. And you can be totally private in how you use these tools. And so Native Mind, pretty great. I've noticed that it keeps adding more functionality week after week after week. And since I am using a couple of M4 Macs now, and I this is a very long story, but I did manage to pick up a dirt cheap M1 Mac Studio at a pawn shop a couple months ago that was vastly undervalued. But if you've got a decent M1 or better chip, you can actually run some pretty great models on your local machine.
Wow. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm just going to do one geek of the week for once. This is the iRig Pre 2. And it turns out if you need to live stream to YouTube and feed XLR professional audio from a stage right into your iPhone 14 with it uses the adapter. So it feeds to an 1/8 inch microphone adapter. And then if you have that little converter, convert to either USB-C or Lightning. But I successfully used this on Saturday morning, and there were over 1,000 views of our live stream, and that was pretty cool. So I love IK Multimedia. I've used their iRig mics before, and they've got a lot of good stuff. So
well, and just to remind our audience that Dr. Frere is the original story chaser, right? And was using his phone to broadcast out before broadcasting out was cool.
What was that called? There was this, from the Smithsonian and these different Ustream. Remember Ustream?
Yeah. Well, and it's so funny you should mention that because the week I met Mike was at a state standards committee. My good buddy that I work with at MTDA. Ustream had just come out, and I said, this is going to change the world, right? Because you now have the ability to live stream from a device, right, like your phone and or a computer, and it was so amazing that you could do that. Now, of course, it's like we're on this wonderful StreamYard platform, which really is a television studio for $20 a month, right? Like it has such advanced tools, and you can do such amazing things with it. And the fact that for what we've lacked in consistency and being up week to week for the last several years, we've gained so much knowledge about how to instantly do a live stream podcast. But we changed tools several times at the beginning, but now it is effortless. And again, double-edged sword, right? But the fact that two dudes can on a Wednesday night every week with one click of the button broadcast to a live world audience is nothing to scoff at, and pretty extraordinary stuff.
And even when one slacks off and doesn't get things published, I mean, it's automatically archived to YouTube. And on that note, I think we have 51 Facebook subscribers. So we want to encourage everybody. If you have not liked the EdTech Situation Room on Facebook, please do that for us, because you will help us be able to stream live to Facebook. Facebook has changed they changed their policies quite a while back, and you have to have 100 followers. So please help us get. We have 59. So we need 41 more folks. I'm going to sound like the local NPR pledge drive that we've got going on right now.
Yeah.
All right, sir. I think we probably better wrap it up.
Yep. Actually, I think it's your job to ask me where you can find me on the internet.
Well,
No, it's my job because I'm host. Hey,
Wes,
where can people find you on the internet? Holy God.
I am westfryer.com. I put a new page up for my advocacy that you can find at westfryer.com/advocacy, but westfryer /after has all kinds of links. How about you, Dr. Neifert?
You can find me at aicentrist.com, where I hold out the center position the best that I can in this fast-changing world. But hey, this is the EdTech Situation Room. We're a once-a-week, give or take, podcast, mostly on Wednesday nights, 7 p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, sometime in the middle of the night UTC. If you can't join us live, although I wish you join our small but growing crowd for our EdTech goodness once a week, you can always find us archived on YouTube, where you can always get the latest episode. We hope you have a wonderful week. Stay safe, stay savvy, and we'll see you next time on the EdTech Situation Room. Have a great night.
Good night, everybody.